Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. Welcome to episode 41. Super excited to be here today to talk about this podcast. First off, hope everyone had a great Christmas, whether you celebrated or not. Hope you enjoyed the holiday season. It was great for me. I was in Atlanta with my kids and just a really solid vacation. It was really good to detox and get away from where I live, my normal routine, and spend quality time with the family. I was there basically the whole week and just had a great time. Super excited to be refreshed and diving into sports handicapping again. So again, hope you had a great Christmas, and let's talk about what we're going to talk about in this podcast. Basically, let's go through the outline. We're going to recap last week. Had very limited wagers, not a profitable week, unfortunately. We're going to talk about this growing trend that I absolutely love. You have individuals on Twitter exposing fraudulent handicappers and posting their daily, monthly, yearly results, which is really cool. I love it. We'll dive into that. We're going to talk about plug and play model versus handicapping a stat model. Number 4, biggest mistake I made this year with regards to handicapping, bankroll management. Number 5, only way to profit in sports betting. There's only one way to profit in this thing, and this is a good time to talk about it here, end of the year and starting a new year in a few days. And then finally, we're going to talk about the stat model coaching program that I'm getting ready to launch here, not this Friday, but next. So let's dive into the recap. We'll pull this up. Okay, here's the betting log. If you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, this is available to the general public as well. So you can go to my website, which is MGCovers.com. This exact betting log you can see. Anybody can see this. You just go MGCovers.com, go over to the far right, and you'll see something that says betting log, and it's basically the exact same thing I'm showing on the screen here. So you can see here, we were down. We had a losing day in the NCAA basketball, which was unfortunate. So that was basically a 3-unit swing. So that gets us back down to 47.04 units on the year. And if you knew, we grade one play as 1 unit, which is the correct way to show your units. And let's take a look at that log. It's actually been pretty good. You can see here's 24.19, still up plus 4.12 units. And that's going to bring us into this next part where we talk about a plug and play model. I'm almost convinced that this model is sharp enough just to plug and play it. It went 6-4. Was that right? 6-4. Yep. 6-4 on Saturday, cashing. I think there was one money line dog in there, so that would have been profitable. And this was yesterday. We went handicapping it on my own, which we used line movement as a trigger point. We went 1-4. However, if you look at it, just playing every play with value, these are lines from yesterday, by the way, which was 1229. I'm sorry. And if you look at X, basically what we do is, if you're new, like this is Navy minus 13.7. I think there were dogs in that game. Is we play, if we have a double digit favorite and we have a 5-point differential, then it's basically that play has value. And if you total this up, I run the total, I'm not sure how many total plays is up, we would have been profitable 0.4 units. So the last 2 days have been profitable with just, plug and play in this model. And what I did was, I'm sort of handicapping this model, which I'm using line movement as a trigger point, meaning like if we have value via the model and we have positive line movement, I'm playing. And unfortunately, those were losing wagers yesterday. So what I'm thinking is probably this model is good enough just to plug and play. The mental part that will be a challenge for me is I generally don't like to play high volume. In order to make this work, I'm probably going to have to do that. But let's see what the total number of plays was. I don't think it was like a large number. God, that was a lot. It was 15 plays. So that would have been a lot. So 15 plays would have been total from yesterday. But still, if you'd have wagered, for me, and I got a really good bankroll management video coming here in the next few days. So if I'd have wagered 1/10 unit, I'd have had 1,500 at risk and, just turned a very small profit. And the previous day went 6-4. So we'd have had $1,000 at risk. That's wagering, $100 per play, or what I like to say is 1/10 unit. So we've still been profitable these last 2 days without putting, bankroll at risk there. So that's really exciting. And that's going to segue over into the NBA model. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this on the last podcast, but I made changes to this NBA model. The one we had previously, it was heavy chalk, which means like a lot of times when we had a heavy favorite to win, they were a heavy favorite at the sports books as well. And what you're looking is a log. I didn't break it down like I normally do, which I probably should, showing like actual units game, but this has been extremely profitable. We've tracked this from 12.19 all the way up to 12.29. And I'll bring up an important point. And one thing I've learned this year, and this is very important, and I learned this, listen to another podcast, is that you can't be scared to change model if it's not working. And I've said this a million times too. If you have something that works, you don't change it. You keep doing that. Another mistake I made with NCAA football, the original model we had for that was very successful. Weeks 1, 2, and 3. Did I change the model? I'd already planned to use this model starting week 4. Should have never changed it. Should have stuck with that same model, and probably would have been profitable year to date for NCAA football. But if you have something that's obviously not working, then the only way you're going to improve is to actually, change and create a new model, especially if you're somebody that does what I do, which is model. Another term for that is bottom up. So you can see 12.19, 7-0 the next day, 1-1, 3-3, 1-0, 4-3, 3-0, and had 3 money line dogs cash on that day, which was Christmas Day. Then it went 1-2, 2-2, and then the worst day was 12.28, 1-5. And then yesterday had a winning day at 12.29. Yesterday's lines was Atlanta was -6. My line, books had them at +1. Actually, line moved against Atlanta. And then OKC, you can see their line was -14, my line, and books had them, I think, at -8. So we had a 6-point differential, and that was profitable. So I really believe this NBA model is pretty solid. Now, one thing to note, and this is one of the mistakes, and this is perfect because this is leading us into the next section, is you have to anticipate regression. So if this model is 25 and 16, this will regress. And if you don't understand what regression means, so if you're flipping a coin, heads and tails, right, are your two options, and it lands on heads 5 times in a row. When you flip it the next 5 times, it's not going to land on heads, probably not. It's going to land more on tails because it's going to even out that 50-50 chance, right? So if you have a model, let's add this up, so that's 25 divided by 41. So this model's hitting 61%. It's not going to hit 61% long term. It's going to regress. So what you could do, and probably what I will do, I will wait for this model to regress, maybe have 2 losing days or a losing day, and then jump back in, because it's not going to be able to maintain 61% over the duration of the NBA season. Just not possible. But one thing I do like about this model is it's cashing a lot more money line dogs than the other model. And this is a completely different stat. And I want to say this about stat models too. If you're struggling with this, like if your model looks a lot like the sports book, meaning like, for example, you had, OKC is probably a good example. If all of your lines look like the sports book lines, meaning like when you have a heavy favorite, the book has a heavy favorite, what you can do is start thinking of trying to find a stat that correlates to winning, but is extremely undervalued in the marketplace. And that's basically what I did with this model. And if you remember back during baseball season, I don't use any starting pitching stats at all. There's only 3 parts to Major League Baseball: starting pitching, hitting, and relief pitching. So starting pitching is extremely overvalued. I'm not saying don't use starting pitching in your model. I didn't use it in mine because it is overvalued. So if starting pitch is overvalued, we don't include it. We'll pick up value when that starting pitching is way overvalued, and it was very successful for us. But super excited both on the progress I've made with this NCAA basketball model. It's new, as well as this NBA model is new as well. So super excited about going into 2025 with 2 really good models that I think we can pretty much plug and play. And considering this NBA model is cashing a significant amount of money line dogs, that is extremely promising. And so that leads us into back to the betting log. And we'll talk about the biggest mistake I made this year is that, and I kind of touched on this briefly about regression. And I'm going to talk about Major League Baseball. We were at the peak of Major League Baseball season. You can see we finished at 34.12 units at the peak of Major League Baseball, this was probably the end of July. In fact, let's pull up this log and take a look at this. Let me see if I can do this here. Let's see. We started wagering on, let me go down here to the bottom. I think it was the end of August. We were up 52 units. We started wagering on May 13th, and let me see when that was. Let me see where I was at the end of August. There's 48 there. At some point here we go. Okay, August. All right, you can see it on the screen there. All right, August the 27th, we were at 52.2 units. All right, now, a good season for any sport is 10 units, meaning like if you can get a sport to 10 units for the duration of the season, it doesn't matter if it's basketball, football, Major League Baseball, that's good. You have 3 sports that hit 10 units apiece, that's 30 units. It generally doesn't work out that way, but 10 units for a season is pretty good. Now, granted, you need to factor in the ROI, meaning like if you get 10 units in Major League Baseball, but your ROI is like 1%, it's almost like not even worth it to wager that amount. You know, a respectable return would probably be, especially for baseball, would be probably 5% or higher ROI. But nonetheless, August 27th, we were sitting at 52.2 units. What I should have done at this point was shut it down. We only had, at this point, I just come off if you're looking at that was a crazy run. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That was a 9-3 run to get to 52.2 units. And I had basically maxed out. That entire run was close to 70%, which is not sustainable. And I should have been smart enough to realize that we were going to have a tremendous amount of regression. And if I shut it down at 52.2 units, let's see, and we ended up at 34.82. Let me add this up. That's what? 18. Y'all, that's 18 unit differential. So we would have had 18 more units just in that. So 47 plus 18, 65 units. We left so much money on the table making that, or not making the decision to shut it down. And big shout out to Dave, one of my former clients, who's a really good sports bettor in his own right. He has that philosophy as well. So you have a goal that you set, and if you hit that goal, you shut it down. And another example of that in this season would be NCAA football. Yeah, you can see there's minus 5.09 units. And we got that to, I think it was 9.1 units, and then went on losing skid there. And it's the same deal. I mean, if you've hit the 10 especially for NCAA football, so we had hit right at almost 10 units, and the model was hitting right at 60%. Boom. The only thing it's going to do, it's not going to increase. It's not going to go from 60 to 65. I mean, it could, but it's almost statistically impossible for it to do that. And it's more likely to go in the other direction. So if you're hitting 60%, it's not going to go down to 55%. It's going to go even way below 60% to average out hitting 50%, which is the mean. So it's in sports statistics, everything is always regressing to the mean. And so even that right there, that was a 15 units swing. That stings to even talk about this. So that was another one where we would have been up, 10 units. You add that on top of the other one. Now you're getting up to what, 75 units. And for a lot of ways, same with NBA. I don't know if I would shut NBA down at 5 units, but we were up 5 units in NBA. Now it's at minus, 4.03. So, yeah. So the focus this year will be, if we can get a sport to, 10 units, and you might want to, it's hard to say what the correct way to, how are you going to approach that if you get to 10 units? And, are you realistically going to shut it down? So I think in NCAA football, when we hit 10 units, it was like the end of October, or almost at like October the 20th or something like that. What you could do is you could cherry pick it moving forward, meaning you could just have one play per week and play the best play. Because then if you're up 10 units and you have 7 plays the next week, now you got 7 units at risk. And that's basically what we did. We were still playing pretty heavy volume there in NCAA football, and ended up, hitting a losing skid. Same with NBA. So the main thing to focus on, or to think about, the lesson to be learned here is once you hit you need to have a unit goal before you start any season, whether it's NBA, baseball, whatever. Have a unit goal, and if you hit that goal, don't be afraid to shut it down, and then you can focus on another sport. Because getting 52 units out of Major League Baseball at the end of August, I mean, you only had 1 month left in the year, and it's a 6-month season. I mean, that's just a huge mistake on my part. And the reason why I think it's hard to shut it down is when you're looking at it and you're like, wow, we're at 52 units, we're doing well. Even though I'm smart enough to understand regression, it's hard to shut it down, because what you're seeing is like, wow, we're 52 units. If we keep going, maybe we hit 60 units. And that was not the case at all. So that was probably the biggest mistake we made this year. And, but still, nonetheless, we were profitable. And if you're new here, just to remind you, only 5% of the people that do this long-term are profitable, which is going to, a nice segue into the next part we're going to talk about on the podcast. All right, this is a growing trend. I absolutely love this. You have other individuals that are posting the records of these handicappers that don't post their records. And as a general rule, if a handicapper, quote handicapper, doesn't post their long-term record, or you don't see, there's no way to look at a betting log like what I have posted, there's a 99.9% chance they're not profitable long-term. So this handicapper here, basically calls out Sean Perry wins. I don't know who this is. Said he lost 10 bets in a row. Now that's normal. I don't really like that approach, because losing 10 in a row is possible, for anybody. And even a successful handicapper is going to go through a losing skid. But I think it would be, if I would give these guys any advice, it would be to focus on posting their long-term. And I actually pulled this up. Let's see if I can do this here. Yeah. And it's very blurry to see on the screen, but if you look down here in his last, I think that's right. It looks like for the month, he's down, it looks like 11 units for the month, but the main one is like, it says all time. I'm assuming that's year to date. He's down like 31 units. So that's really what you want to focus on, that big number. And again, I've said this before. I think I said it last week on the podcast. If handicappers were required, they could not post their daily results if they could only post their long-term record, what their year-to-date was. Sports betting, it would be a lot more realistic. People would understand it a lot better. And then people would also understand how difficult this business is. But I absolutely love this trend. And I think this is going to be something that gains a lot of traction. And this helps a lot of people because, if you see somebody posting something that seems unrealistic, I just watched a video. I was going to include it in this podcast. I might make a separate video about it. A guy said he hits 70% long-term. And there's something called the Z ratio. You can Google that, Z ratio for sports betting. It's to go 70% on 1,000 wagers, it's 1 in a trillion. The odds of hitting 70% long-term in sports betting, and long-term basically means about 1,000 wagers, which is what I generally wager in a season. It's a 1 in a trillion chance of hitting 70%. Basically impossible to do. But this guy's on a podcast saying he hit 70%, which we know is not true. And if we take a look at this same post, big shout out. Let's give this guy a shout out, Steve McQueen, for posting these records. This guy here, I can't remember the handicapper's name, but you can see here he posts, he's 3-18 on his last 21 posted plays. Again, losing skid, that's normal. Again, back to the same point I made earlier. I wish they would post like long-term, but again, maybe he doesn't have, in the defense of this guy that's exposing this handicapper going 3-18, maybe he doesn't have a long-term record. And more than likely, if you go to his site, whoever this quote handicapper representing himself as profitable, even though he's 3-18 in his last 21 plays, and he may be profitable, I don't know, but I actually did go there. I went to his site and there's nowhere to see any kind of long-term record. So as a general rule, if you go to a handicapper's website, Twitter account, whatever, and there's no way to see their betting log. 99.9% chance they do not win long term. Which brings me to another handicapper that is real popular on Twitter, and it is GRP Wins. A lot of you guys have followed him. He gets a lot of shout outs on the Circa podcast. I don't know if George is a profitable sports bettor or not, but he's a very popular sports betting figure. And he has been tracking Adam Chernoff, who is with Right Angle Sports. And Adam goes on and does a segment on BSIN, which is a popular sports betting show. I think they're even on part of YouTube TV. So they get a ton of views from sports betting. Now, I'm assuming that what George has posted for Adam's record is correct for NFL. He's 45-61, which is 41%. Now, again, anybody can have, you could still have a losing season in a sport and still be profitable, which I just showed you on my betting log. Like, that's possible. In fact, you can have a losing season overall and still be considered a shark. My first year in this thing was 2015. I've had 2 losing seasons. So all the other years were, winning seasons with the exception of 2. And one of those was just brutal soccer. I thought I had soccer draws figured out and didn't, and just, absolutely got destroyed, lost about 25 grand in a period of almost like 45 days. So it is possible to have a losing season and still be considered a shark. But the big issue I have with Adam, with Right Angle Sports here, if you're going on a sports betting podcast, a show, and representing yourself as a sharp, I think you should disclose the fact that, hey, for NFL, I don't really have a good feel for the market. I'm currently 41%. I'm 45-61. I think disclosing that would be very important, because there's more than likely, there's probably people telling these plays, playing the same plays that he's playing. And then the other controversial thing about this is when you go to Adam's page, he's basically saying that he's profitable long-term, and he may be, but the fact that you're not disclosing on this show that you're only hitting 41% for NFL, that's a big problem. That is a huge, huge problem. But again, I love this trend where people are exposing handicappers. And also, too, the big takeaway from this, if you're listening to this podcast, is that, this is a very difficult business. And to remind you that it is, the majority of people are not winning in sports betting, regardless of what you see. If you see something that looks unrealistic, looks fake, it probably is more than likely. So keep that in mind. And if a sports handicapper, if there's no way to see his long-term record, there is a 99.99% chance that he is not profitable long-term. Which brings us to the final point I want to make about making this podcast is the only way to profit in sports betting is long-term. Like, that's it. So if you've got any, you don't have to sign up for my service. I do offer service. It's very inexpensive, $50 a month to get access to my power rankings, $100 a month to get access to all my plays. You can also, there's a huge discount if you join for the year. Link in the description of this video and also on the podcast as well. The only way to make money in this is long-term. So whether you're subscribed to my plays, whoever it is, you can't jump in and have expectations to make a profit in 1 year. For example, and let me give you, you can't have expectations to make a profit in 1 month. So if you go look at, let me get back over here. So for fall sports, we were in the hole. If you look down there on the right, we were -7 units. So for the fall, we did not make money. We actually lost money for the fall. Year to date, we were profitable. So again, it's very similar to the stock market. If a share is, $20 a share, it drops down to 18. Is it possible for that share to drop down to $18 a share in 1 month? Absolutely. But if it's a quote good stock, you should be able to profit from that stock long-term, or a quote mutual fund, which is a collection of, profitable stocks altogether. So it's really the only way to make it in this business. It's not talked about enough that this is a long-term investment. Again, cannot have expectations of turning a profit weekly, can have expectations of turning a profit monthly. It is a long-term investment. And the only way to profit from sports betting is to invest long-term. So again, if I had clients that actually played every one of my plays for the fall, they would have lost money. If anybody had told or played all my plays year to date, that would be profitable. So again, keep that in mind when you're signing up for a service. If it's a profitable handicapper, you're going to have to stick with that handicapper for the duration. Because if you start, and what most people do, the mistake they make when they're subscribed to handicapping services, they'll wait till this handicapper goes on a big run. Oh, this guy's hitting, 70% in NFL. You sign up for the service, not factoring regression. He ends up losing, you lose, you cancel subscription, and then you continue this, cycle. And so the best time will be to find a handicapper that's actually, maybe not, that's going through a losing skid. And if he's profitable, it's going to do the opposite. It's going to regress up. So anyway, keep that in mind. Last point to make on the podcast is the stat model program. Super excited about this. I'm going to bump it to next week. So the stat model coaching program is going to launch on January the 10th, which is a little bit less than 2 weeks away. Super excited. Basically what the stat model coaching program is, I'm going to teach you on a daily basis how to build stat models. It's expensive, more expensive than the normal service that I offer, but we'll be working, have a library of videos that you can watch that's going to expedite the learning process for building models. And also you'll get daily coaching. So you can send me emails daily and I can say, do this, don't do this, et cetera, et cetera. And there's going to be 2 levels. You can join for 3 months or you can join for a year. If you want more information on that, go to the website, MGCovers.com. Go over to the far right next to the betting log. You'll see something that says stat model. Enter your email and you'll be able to get more information about that. All right, that's a wrap for episode 41. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in and talk to you guys throughout the week. Peace.